Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
So, I want to talk about the Oxfording pictures, and we are on number 3. So, just as a kind of a introduction, these are Rinzai pictures used in the Rinzai school mainly, and they are a way to discuss the practitioner's path to maturity. So the one that we're talking about, and these pictures are representations which were developed by a Zen master named Kuan Shion, or Kuan Shion in Japanese, in the 12th century. So that's the genesis of these pictures that we're going to talk about today. And the one we want to talk about is the third one, which I think you can see the arrow, is this one right here. And it shows the little guy. Of course, it's always a man, but this, of course, applies to everyone, not just guys. But this little guy, you can see in the first one, actually, they're out of order. Well, no, they're not out of order. Okay, the first one, he's looking around. The second one, he finds the hoof prints, which are these little things right here. And then the third one, he actually sees the backside of the ox. Now, in the verses that accompany this, which I mostly are not talking about, he gets a glimpse of the whole ox. But here in the picture, he sees just part of it. Anyway, you can see he has in his hand, especially in the second picture, he's got little rope, little noose that he's running around with, and a whip. So he's ready, right? He's ready to capture, he's ready to tame this beast that he is looking for. So in the third picture, we just see the backside of the ox. This picture is called Perceiving the Ox. So if you heard the talk on the second picture, you know that in the second picture, he is already studying Buddhism. So in the first picture, he's wandering around looking for a path. He finds it, it's Buddhism. He's been studying Buddhism. This person, I should say he, just as a default, I shouldn't do that. They have been studying Buddhism. And so they have some concept of what it is that they think that they're looking for. So that's what's happening in the third picture. But we could ask ourselves, what is it that that person is seeking? Like, what is it that this ox is supposed to represent that they're searching for? So some commentators say this person is looking for their true self. They're looking for Buddha nature, which I would say is a pretty good description of what the bull represents, but it's not the totality of what is going on here, because in the fourth picture, which I'll talk about next time here, he's captured the bull, but as you can see, the bull is not cooperating. So I think that what this picture's better work as an analogy is this path of practice. So we see this path of practice, and we see how it relates to the transformation of the small self. So that's that part of ourselves that is not particularly nice, little selfish, does unskillful things. That small part of ourselves, which is usually referred to as a small self, is how that transformation happens, how we become more mature, compassionate, skillful people. And how we manifest, using the language of Soto Zen, how we manifest Buddha nature, our own Buddha nature in our daily activity. So in the third picture, this person gets a really quick glimpse of what they're seeking, or at least what they think they're seeking, the story that they have about what they're seeking. But in the commentaries, this is the first time that this person actually sees this thing itself. And what they're seeing is a visceral, non-intellectual encounter with what they're seeking. So this is the first time that they've had that experience, and it is happening within the context of this Zen practice that they've been engaged in up to this point. So what I want to talk about here is what it is this person is getting a glimpse of and what it is that they don't fully understand. So I want to start out first by talking intellectually about Buddha nature. So if we're assuming that what they are looking for, what we are engaged in, especially in Soto Zen, is this manifestation of this thing we are calling Buddha nature. And so I want to talk about that from an intellectual point of view first, so you have a sense of the territory that we're talking about here. And so what is Buddha nature? It is something called reality itself. It is suchness. It is things just as they are, as we say in Zen. It's the person of no rank. It is our original face. So these are kind of pointer labels, if you will, descriptions that we have of what we call this thing called Buddha nature. The concept of Buddha nature and all these other expressions, they have a long history and they are developed throughout the philosophy of Buddhism. So just to let you know that this is not something that Dogen thought up by himself, that this is something that has a long history of development in Buddhism, and in particular in Mahayana Buddhism. But Dogen did have his own way of understanding this in the way that he expresses this concept, and that's what I'm going to use as a methodology to talk about this with you today. So here's what Buddha nature is not. Buddha nature is not something potential that lies dormant in your body that you are trying to wake up. Buddha nature is not intellectual, and Buddha nature is not a soul or some kind of eternal, permanent essence that is personal to you, that carries on from lifetime to lifetime, or has some eternal, unchanging presence. What it is, or some of the ways we can talk about it, is that it is the arising and falling, impermanence. It is interbeing, it's interconnection, it's the whole of the world's functioning. And within this context, there is particularity. So you are a particularity, a particular person. This is a particular cup. So within that context, there is the particular aspect and the universal aspect. And the universal aspect is that nothing is separate from the totality of everything functioning. So this cup is not separate, it's made of clay. The clay comes from the earth is a result of innumerable causes and conditions that we could not possibly name. It has water in it, et cetera, et cetera. So all of that makes up the whole of the totality, is part of the whole of the totality of reality's functioning, as are we, also part of that. So in Zen, this has been expressed with this phrase, fences, walls, tiles, and pebbles. But the phrase could also be something like teacups, marigolds, mountains, and sutras. It could be anything like that. So, and another piece of this is that everything is Buddha nature, and that everything is sentient. So these fences, walls, tiles, and pebbles are sentient. Blue mountains walking are sentient. So we say this to indicate that all things are Buddha nature, and therefore all things are sentient. Nothing's left out of this. Everything is included. So in Busho, fascicle in the Shobogenzo that Dogen wrote, he said, which means Buddha nature, he said, and this very famous saying of his, he said, all beings are Buddha nature. Not you have Buddha nature, not you acquire Buddha nature, but all beings are Buddha nature. So everything is Buddha. All things are Buddha. Now I'm just saying, and what does that mean? I'm not going to go off and talk about this a lot, sort of as a tangent, but it's an interesting question. What are your fantasies or ideas about what you think Buddha is, and why is it that all these things don't fall in that category for you? What is it that we think is Buddha? And why is it that the person you don't like doesn't fall in that category, right? Or why is it that shit doesn't fall in that category, but flowers do? So that's an interesting question to ask yourself. Okay, but here in these pictures in number 3, this person is trying to capture the ox, this metaphor. But the person is attempting to grasp Buddha nature, but doesn't actually realize what this Buddha nature is. And they don't understand that it's not graspable. It is not intellectually graspable, even though I just gave you the intellectual description of what this thing is. So it's good to be in the ballpark of what it is that you think you're looking for, but that description is not the thing itself. So how can we hold on to something that is not inside, not outside? Or how do we grasp the whole of reality? So how do we catch this bull? So when we talk about Buddha nature or any kind of concept, we try to objectify that concept as it, right? It being something outside the self. But this it is not separate from it, and it's not separate from you, and it's not separate from everything that's arising or falling. So we could say Buddha nature is empty space. And Dogen speaks of this in his fascal that he wrote, Suki, which means the moon. And also in Shobogenzo, he wrote, the Buddha Shakyamuni said, the true Dharma body of a Buddha is just like empty space. So Buddha nature, empty space are analogous. This is important for what I'm about to say next. These two things are analogous. And it meant, and then he said, okay, so the Buddha Shakyamuni said, the true Dharma body of a Buddha is just like empty space. It manifests its shape in response to beings. So there's a koan that I want to talk about that's related to this and related to the third picture. It's called Shigong's emptiness. And it appears in a collection of koans that Dogen put together called the 300 koans. And if anybody's geeky out there, it comes from, I think it's 11th century Chinese text in English, which means record of the transmission of the Lamb. And so that's where this story originally comes from. Anyway, the story is Chan Master Huizhang or Shizhang asked Shishang, can you grab hold of empty space? So we can substitute here Buddha nature for empty space, and then it would become, can you grasp Buddha nature? Can you hold on to Buddha nature? And Shishang said, well, yes, as a matter of fact, I can. So the master said, well, okay, how do you do that? And Shishang grabs an empty space with his hand. So he goes like this, right? This is, I'm going to show you how you grab Buddha nature, show you how you grab emptiness. So, you know, he's not really impressed. The master is not very impressed by that. So the master responds, you can't grab hold of empty space, or you can't grab hold of Buddha nature. It's not something that you can hold on to. So the point of trying to catch the air or grasp empty space or trying to describe Buddha nature is that here in the koan is that you can't grasp these abstract things. You can't, you know, like do that, hold on to it intellectually. You have to have a, you know, a different reality's true nature is not found in descriptive concepts. They're just ways that we kind of get in the ballpark of what we're looking at. It can only actually be directly experienced. So when the Shitang saw that Master Wei Zhang was very unimpressed with his answer, Shitang said, well, how does my elder brother grab it? So here these two Dharma brothers having this conversation. He says, well, how does my elder brother grab it? And then the master grabbed Shitong's nose and pulled it. Shitong cried out in pain and said, what a brute! You could pull a person's nose right off. And then the master said, well, that's how you have to grab hold of it. So here we have this direct experience. How do you experience Buddha nature? Now. You experience it right now. You grab hold. It's real. You can feel it. It's your life right now at this moment. It's not some abstract concept. You can't go, oh, that's what it is. Nah, nah, wrong. But so he grabs his nose. So this is a direct experience. Ouch, it hurts. It's a direct experience. There's nothing intellectual going on in that experience. So what is it that this practitioner sees hiding in the bushes in the third picture? What is this insight that allows the seer to see something outside that looks like the idea of what they want to see? Does that make sense? Like, what is it that they think they're seeing that they can recognize that looks like this thing they're trying to find, this ox? And how does the ox grab the nose? And how does the practitioner grab the nose of the ox? Like, how does that activity happens? And the ox looks enough like our idea of what it is that we're seeking and studying up to now. So, actually seeing the ox, we experience and also hold that non-intellectual feeling of isness, is this thing. But, we still don't really understand what the ox is. Now, just as a side, I would say here, you should go and talk to your teacher. It's like, how do you know what it is that you think you know? You should go and talk to your elder brother or sister, and find out about what this is. But in general, how do we gain this understanding? So the way we answer the question in Soto Zen is through our direct experience of formal practice with a teacher, formal practice studying the Dharma, and formal practice of studying this Dharma in the context of Sangha or community. So how does this break down? This breaks down into Zazen, service as in chanting service, work practice, ceremony, Doksan, meeting with your teacher. And I wrote in parentheses, and I've threw a couple of parties thrown in during that. So it's also studying the precepts and how to apply them in our daily lives, which is important. We can't leave behind sila, morality, ethics, precepts in all of this, because that is the ultimately, that is the hallmark, if you will, the recognition, if you will, of the mature practitioner. And so, these are the things that we do. And I was thinking about this earlier, and I thought, the few students that I have who don't live here in town, when they talk to me, I say, go find a Dharma center where you live. Because when we practice in a vacuum, all by ourselves, there's no push there. There's no one's grabbing our nose. There's nothing to give us feedback about how we're experiencing what we're experiencing. We just have this experience of, I'll tell you a story. When I was in my 20s, I didn't practice anywhere in particular. I would go and I would meditate, and I would sit for, 8 hours at a time. I just go in my room, and I could sit full lotus back then. I'd sit full lotus, I'd light a candle and, sit in my room and space out or whatever I was doing for 4 or 5 or 6 hours or whatever. And and then one day I was with a friend of mine, and we were driving around and something happened, and I was like going to the person who was driving another car. It's like, you stupid ass person, what is your problem? You know, blah, 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 like that. And this friend of mine who I'd known for a long time, she said, well, I don't know, I'm paraphrasing, I don't know what you're doing meditating, because it's clearly not manifesting in your daily life. And at that point, I thought to myself, okay, well, forget the meditation. And I just went out and started playing softball, going to bars and, you know, being a young dyke. So it's like that was a really good question. If we don't have anything that's pushing on us, we don't have any community that we're working with, that we're being with, we're not having any kind of engagement with a teacher, a person you can go and say, I had this experience, you know, it didn't work out very well. I'm angry with this person, I'm whatever. How do I apply the practice to that? Because our tendency when we're by ourselves is just to do what feels good. And if it doesn't feel good, we don't do it. So we never get pushed to actually engage with the practice. So that's why I say to students who live out in the town, go find a Sangha. You know, I'm happy to be your teacher, but go find a Sangha so that you're actually in community and using the Dharma and growing in that way with that, using that kind of language. So we do these things. So we do Zazen, we do service, chanting service, we do work practice, we do ceremony, Doksan, we have parties, we study the precepts. So as we engage in these activities, we let the knowing part take care of itself. We let the nose grabbing part take care of itself. We don't have to worry about that. We don't have to look for special experiences. These things will take care of themselves without trying to push it. So we don't try to push it into any kind of shape. These oxes, this ox is just fences, wild tiles, pebbles, teacups, marigold, us, mountains, sutras. It's encountering the self in Zazen, in hearing birds outside the window. It's encountering the self in hearing the guys using weed whackers throughout most of our Zazen this morning as they're clearing out that field next door. So it's that is this practice. Dogen absolutely believed that Zazen was a very important Dharma gate, but it's not the only Dharma gate. But it's a key gate to opening our perceptions and seeing the ox. So Zazen is part of all of these practices I mentioned. And for Dogen, you know, this was a complete path, not Zazen by itself, but the totality of this activity in Soto Zen is a complete path to awakening. So Dogen actually describes the how in his inimitable language, the how of how we do this. In his treatise on Buddha nature, in this Fasco Busho, he said, you must devote yourself without fail to the truth of Mu Buddha nature. Okay, let's talk about what Mu Buddha nature means. Mu Buddha nature means basically pay attention to your life without labeling it. Pay attention to your life without labels, not labels of delusion or enlightenment or running after this enlightenment or whatever it is. Just pay attention to your life. So you could paraphrase this by saying, devote yourself to your practice without labels. Just practice, just meet things as they are. And then he said, although without these labels, he actually said Mu Buddha nature, but we'll say without these labels, you may have to grope your way along. So he's saying, you know, this is not like a panacea for all of the doubts or effort that you may have to put into this. You know, you have to grope your way along. It's not going to be clear all the time that you're practicing. You have to have faith in this Zazen, faith in chanting, faith in Sangha, faith in your teachers. Do this thing, do this practice, have faith in it, you know, because you may have to grope your way. But then he says, there is a touchstone. What? Okay, so this is very Zen. What? And I've talked about this before. You say, what? What is it? What is it? What is it? What is this thing called reality? What is this thing that we are engaging in? What is this life? What is the sound of this weed whacker next door? What's going on here? This very what is the answer to what? This what is your life, just as it is right now. That's what's going on. That's where we put our attention. So he says, what? There's a touchstone. What? As Pema Chodron says, start where you are. What? Feet on the ground. This experience right now, what is it? So pay attention to your life as it is right now, not like you'd like it to be, not like some fantasy about what it should be, you know, just what is it? And right there is where your practice is. And then he says, there is a temporal condition, you, a temporal condition, which is to say, this is the time element of the present moment. You in the present moment, you in this place, you in these relationships, you with this practice, because we can't practice abstractly outside the self. We, each body, each mind practices. This self practices. So we're not trying to get out of this self. We're not trying to get rid of this self. This self in this moment is doing this practice. So he says, there is a temporal condition, you, there is entrance into its dynamic functioning affirmation. So when we enter into the dynamic function of our life, when we enter into the dynamic function through the particularity of our life, we are entering into the dynamic function of reality just as it is in the totality of the universality of reality itself. And that's like really highfalutin language. You go outside, you breathe the air, you look around, you say, I am made for this world. The reason this world is beautiful is because I am made for this world. This universality of this world presencing itself to me, which includes all the parts you don't like. This universality of this totality of this amazing thing that we are conscious of as human beings. This is the affirmation. This is the dynamic functioning. This is entrance into its dynamic functioning, affirmation. He says there is a common nature, all pervading. It is a direct and immediate access. Your life is pulling your nose all the time. It's not abstract. So how do we practice with that? That's what we're doing. We're practicing with that. We're making this Buddha out of our own clay. So this is our effort at this time. And then as we do this, the universe, our practice, all of these things will reveal itself to us over time. Not necessarily will be easy all the time, but it will be manifest to us. So this is how we bring forth this true self. This is how we manifest the thing that we already are. Everything already is this so-called Buddha nature. So just completely pay attention to your activity right now and do your best to do this without labels, to drop your preconceived ideas and goals and just integrate yourself. Use the precepts as a guide. It's not abstract in that sense. Use the precepts, go back to the precepts. This is allowing what? To tweak your nose. This is allowing your life to grab onto your nose. And sometimes, ouch, that hurts. And sometimes maybe, oh, that feels really good. So you continue to practice, continue to make effort with all beings. We don't just do this in a vacuum. Sometimes we can't tell, we can't see all beings. So this is, although without these labels, you may have to grope your way along, but there is this touchstone. what is the touchstone. All right, so next time we're going to talk about the next ox herding picture, which, as you can see, he has actually managed to catch the ox, but he looks a little bit like those kids in the rodeos, you know, where you see them running out and they're gonna grab the steer and flip it over, but instead they're being pulled along by the rope or by the horns by the steer. So that's kind of like, looks like what that's happening, a little amusing. Okay, thank you very much.